Welcome to the MHP Exchange, where the riches are in the niches. We'll show you how to invest your way into mobile home parks with real strategies, tips, and behind-the-scenes know-how to grow your cash flow. Stick around. This is where smart investing begins.
All right, so if you spend any time in real estate, you're taught the same thing over and over. Underwriting, deal structure, creative financing, how to raise capital. I mean, you could find resources on all of it. But the one thing that you cannot find any information on is what happens when your deal becomes the headline. The numbers are not the issue. It's not a bad partner. It becomes a public issue. When you have community backlash, when you have political pressure, when you have noise from the outside, which is all of a sudden changing the narrative. And that starts to form before you have a chance to speak. I've lived this. I've gone through it. And I can tell you that this is where deals can get stalled, where lenders can get frozen and partners, can start to freak out. Because once perception starts to shift, that could change everything. So today we're going to talk about what to do when the news isn't in your favor. It's a topic that no one really talks about. And joining us today, and we're actually making a little bit of history on the MHP Exchange today. This is in nearly 100 episodes.
Wow.
This is the first returning guest that we have on. We have Chris Stout, right?
I am honored.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm honored to have you back on. For those of you who listen, he was on episode 7. I went in.
Oh, was I that early?
That early.
Wow.
Chris is a real estate developer in Staten Island and New Jersey. He's a real estate investor who owns property in multiple states across the board.
Yeah.
He's a wealth of knowledge. And Chris, thanks for joining us on this episode.
Yeah. Thank you for having me a second time. It's a pleasure. I didn't realize I was that early on it. I remember the office we went to. That was an early in the morning podcast. Anyway, yeah, thanks for having me. And so I mean, we're attacking something that you're talking about right now.
Correct. And it's funny, and I was talking to you about this off air. This was something that it was a concept or a thought I had about putting together an episode like this, because I've gone through this, and then all of a sudden there's some stuff going on here. And just to give everybody a little bit of context, and I'm going to let you to give it away.
Yeah, go for it.
New York City has recently gone through what they call City of Yes. And the idea with City of Yes was to increase density in transit-orientated areas. So if you were half a mile away from a train station, they wanted developers to increase housing supply, because New York City, like a lot of places, has an affordability crisis. And it's been something that they've been battling for over a decade. They've come up with all these different solutions. And Mayor Adams' solution was, hey, this is a supply issue. Let's increase supply, increase housing. That should tackle affordability. Now, for most of the city, that meant that if you had a 10-unit building, maybe you get a 20 or 30-unit building. In Staten Island, a little bit different. So, Chris, maybe this is where I'll throw it to you and kind of give a little, background on this.
Yeah. So the City of Yes is a new housing initiative that's basically allowing more density, like you said. A little bit of backlash in other boroughs, but inevitably where an apartment building was going, another apartment is still going, just a little bit denser, a little bit taller, a couple more units. So they decreased the dwelling unit factor, which is how many units can you put in a certain area. So basically apartments could get smaller now, which is really going towards like the European trend of like super small space. So where you used to be able to only be able to put an apartment per 600, you used to be able to only put an apartment 800 square feet. Now it's 600 square feet. So the city is increasing the amount of studios throughout the city. And really the way they're attacking the affordability crisis is increase supply. That simple.
Okay.
And we have to, in that case, they have to increase supply so rapidly that it has to outpace the demand, which the demand is just incredibly tremendous. And they basically said, Staten Island, pull your pants up. You have to be part of this.
Yeah.
And the people here don't like it.
Well, and to give some context,
yeah,
right? Staten Island is a bedroom community. It's predominantly single family homes, duplexes or two families. In Staten Island or New York City, it's called a two family.
Yeah.
And the lot size typically in the borough would be anywhere from like a 30 by 100 to maybe a 50 by 100. I mean, if you, on the rare occasions that you find 100 by 100, which is a big lot inside of New York City, it's a rarity. So, but it is a bedroom type community, and it's not used to having high density housing.
Right. You have between 3,000 and 4,000 square foot lots here. And the rest of the country, depending on where you're from listening to this, a lot of parts of the country measure the lots in acres.
Correct.
And if you ask someone in Staten Island how many acres is your lot, they would have no idea.
Correct.
So it's really 3,000 and 4,000 square foot lots. And really, Staten Island used to be 100 by 10,000 square foot lots, 100 by 100s. The island was completely filled with them. And that was because the island lacked sewers. So then the city came and installed sewers, and you had to do 100 by 100s because you needed septic. So the city came and installed sewers. And then at that point, like the 70s and 80s, there was a tremendous growth of density. And since the 70s and 80s, the zoning code has not changed. The baseline zoning code has not changed. And there's been hundreds of downzonings during that period of time. And basically what they did, what the city backed himself in a corner and downzoned Staten Island so many times that now I could tell you as a developer, like the reason I own property throughout the country is every single job that was available in Staten Island was horrific. Wetlands issue, grades, but the only jobs that were left in Staten Island were trash. So much so that you could get the land for free and still not develop it. So the city recognized it. Mayor Eric Adams went into office saying, I'm going to get this done. And he did. And the city has no option but to paint. I know we're here to talk about the PR thing, but the city has no, and this is where people don't understand. The city has no option but to paint all 5 boroughs with one zoning change. They cannot go neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block. It would be impossible. So basically what they did is they painted the entire city with parameters, like you said, close to the city, close to the train. And with the other 4 boroughs, for the most part, they're almost all 100% transit-oriented district.
So here's the important concept, even if you're not building inside of New York City. Right? But the context really is a lot of this PR issue that happens. And listen, if you buy a piece of real estate, you're looking to create value. To create value, sometimes you're shaking the tree a little bit, right? You're changing the status quo.
That's right.
And that makes that kind of makes people uncomfortable, whether it's a rent bump, whether it's a development project. So here's something that you might be right to do, but that shaking of the tree is where all of a sudden now it becomes a PR issue, right? So maybe we could, if you want to give some color in terms of, what you've experienced, and then we could talk about like ways and tactics to kind of handle that, because this is something that I think wherever you are in the country, right, and you see it happening, especially with social media, it's easy to attack a real estate investor or a real estate developer, even if they're doing something that by right they can do.
So I mean, it's actually we should stay on this topic of like what makes people upset and how do you deal with it. And really what makes people upset is when you're really changing the landscape of an area quickly. And like we said, the other 4 boroughs aren't seeing a change of landscape as much as Staten Island is. So now we're in front of this PR or tremendous uproar of the neighborhood because Staten Island's landscape is changing. I wouldn't say quite drastically. How about this? The change is not nearly as significant as the news is making it out to be. And I learned during this process that the news and politicians alike are simply there to capitalize on stories, or a large portion of what they do is they capitalize on stories. And politicians, they have every right that, and I didn't really think about this, but politicians individually are basically fighting for their jobs every time election comes up, which I've never experienced that. I mean, on the entrepreneurship side, I guess you're fighting every single day for your job. But, a politician is like a government employee job, right? Is that a right way to say it?
Sure.
You're some sort of government employee. And every time you come up for an election, you're basically fighting for your job. So now you have to jump on stories. And what the interesting part is when you stand back, you're like, these were the guys that had the ability to stop whatever they're fighting about. But now that it's passed, now they have to jump on the other side of it and argue against it and use the people that are taking advantage of the law as bait, basically.
But and you broke that down into two different components, right?
Yeah.
And the first component is the press component.
Yeah.
Right? And so the press component, to your point, it's for them. I mean, the press is a business,
Yeah.
right? And it's how do I get eyeballs?
Yes.
Right. So they have a narrative that they need to sell, right? And that narrative fits a certain agenda. It's a human interest story. It's an impact that this is going to have. It's people that are going to be displaced, regardless of what the underlying fact is. It's what is going to make a great headline that's going to get, clickbait, right? That's going to get eyeballs there, which is eventually going to drive revenue for them. So looking at that, right now, it's and we've experienced it. I mean, we purchased a property one time on a Friday, and on a Tuesday, I got a question from a newspaper reporter.
Yep.
Right. So it's just in that cycle of, hey, this is what's going on. There's a change. What does that change mean? Now, your narrative is a little different, right? So your narrative is, you have the ability to put apartment buildings in some of these, neighborhoods that aren't used to apartment buildings, but you're not taking that approach, right?
No, not taking that approach. Just to lean into the press for a second, and then I could get into the story of actually what happened from start to finish. You could use the press greatly to your advantage. You just say it's a big Trump thing. Figure out you could get into the press one of two ways. You could pay for a front page article or some page article, or you could get in for free. So something I did is, with this great community outrage, and I could tell you how I got myself buried into this community outrage. I heard that there's going to be a big community board meeting, and the community board meeting was going to be based on me. So I called the community board. And I said, hey, I heard you guys are meeting tonight, and it's going to be a very large turnout for a project I have going on. I'm going to show up. They're like, really? You sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to bring my kids. They're like, oh, you probably shouldn't do that. I'm like, no, we're all coming. So I called the advance and I said, hey, I heard Chris Stout's going to be at the community board meeting tonight. And when I got there was advance people there. So
that's a very aggressive way to handle that story.
So I've actually heard this from other people, significantly larger than me, that they would tip off themselves. They would tip off where they're going to be or what they're buying. And the anonymous tip would actually be coming from the source itself. And really, I think there's a great way to leverage, because I've heard the statement, if people don't know you, they can't flow you. So if no one knows who you are, you could have the greatest product in the world. No one is going to pay you because they just simply don't know who you are. So how do I increase the amount of people who know me for how many more people could I get on my side during this PR thing? So number one is make sure whatever you're doing in your entire career is not illegal, right? Because then whatever you get recognized for, well, you're not breaking the law. The worst thing, I think a bad PR crisis is, well, you get caught breaking the law and then.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So as long as whatever you're doing is not breaking the law, well, then the doors are open. Like, let's try to get some action here. And when the action came, I was at first very nervous. I was like, oh, this is going to be a problem. And I was getting feedback from others saying like, hey, you might have a problem here. This whole approval process that you're going through might get thrown back in your face. There's court cases to overturn this zoning. There was a lot of things going on. And some people were saying like, this is going to work against you. And I was like, no, it's impossible. It's impossible that we won't be able to turn this around and actually get some good eyes on it. And after attending the court battles that were going on with the politicians and the city to overturn the zoning, I was confident enough that it wasn't going anywhere and we could really lean in. So I think a big part of like, whenever you're doing something, just make sure you know every angle so you could really lean into a certain direction confidently.
I think, the first thing it starts with, and I had looked at like the steps that I've taken. It starts with, before the project even starts, is make sure that you have the right strategy. Right.
Yeah.
Because to your point, if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, then I don't care what PR team you have, it's a disaster. You shouldn't-
Disaster. It will blow up in your face. Yeah.
But we always look at it like when we're coming into an acquisition or looking at a community, okay, here's what's right.
Mhm.
And then, here's what we can do.
Yeah.
Right. And then, what are the optics and then what's justified.
Mhm.
Right. So you kind of look at it from that frame.
Mhm.
And I think nowadays that especially now, because the power of social media and how things get out there and how narratives can get distorted, I think that's something that in terms of the planning, even before the acquisition, it's what can we do? What's the right thing and what's the optics? And I bring that up from your point because what you could do, right? And this is where I think part of your story is what you could do is mid-rise apartments in bedroom communities. What you
Yes.
are doing is something a little different, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to.
Sure.
And so it's, hey, I could do this, but in actuality, I'm doing this. And here's how I'm addressing some of the issues that you have. So while there could be a narrative, there is a justification in some regard, or there could be a justification for what you're doing, even if people don't necessarily like it.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, one of the people at the community board said to me, and it was super interesting, by the way, like if I had the chance to do that again, I would do it 100 times. Just showing up when a whole bunch of people are ready to attack you, like just that environment, I just like thrive in it. I just love it. Someone asked me, how do you go to sleep at night knowing what you're doing to our community? And I said, you know how I go to sleep at night? I know that I'm following the law. I know that in your community, I actually as of right, could build an apartment building with no parking, and it could be all studios. And you know the best tenant for that apartment building? It's city programs. It's the truth. Calling what it is, the city is paying 20-something $100 for a studio now. So that would be the highest and best use for that property. And I decided I'm not going to do that. I'm going to build $900,000 two-family townhouses that are not built for investors. Investors will not buy these properties. Why? Because we put a studio downstairs and it's a 3-bedroom duplex above. So what is it going to be? It's going to be for the first or second time home buyer that could collect $1,500 downstairs, who could not use the studio at all, who could put a kid down there, a family member. So this will not be
and just for a point of reference, because I know $900,000 is a lot of money, right? But it's relative. It's relative because in this market that you're developing in, the median sale price last year was like $713,000.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about,
and that's taken into account houses that are 30, 40, 50 years old.
Correct. Right. So what we're talking about in the market that you're developing in is relatively affordable. Yeah. Right. And I use that word relative because it's still $900,000 to $1 million. But it is in this market, it would be deemed an affordable type product.
Yeah.
Right?
And also to bring up like salaries, I'm a retired fireman. The average fireman who does cop fireman, same salary, and sanitation workers, so call it like the 3 big ones, an average fireman could take home $150,000 a year here in New York City, where I know of the parts of the country, it's not even close. So if a fireman marries a cop or I'm not sure what teachers make, but if 2 city employees meet, it's an average of a $300,000 a year income for that combined household is not completely out of line. Yeah. So for anyone saying like $900,000 is not affordable, salaries are higher here, but also the homes.
Yeah, and the taxes, by the way, and the taxes,
and the taxes, which actually property taxes aren't out of control here. I don't think. Do you disagree?
I slightly disagree with you on that. On that topic, I do think property taxes here have gotten accelerated, to the point where it becomes an impact. I mean, when you're talking $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 a year in property taxes and the quality of service you're getting, it's a little, it's a little off, but that's a different topic.
Yeah.
But the other point that you want to break down for people listening, right, is when the press contacts you, there doesn't necessarily have to be a rush to respond. Right. It should be some thought put into it. And I'm going to use this as a case in point. On that Tuesday, when the response came, I knew what our strategy was. It was a hybrid property that we acquired, mobile home park, apartments that were in there. We went apartment, but we're taking a complex at a time where we were doing some increases, and the rents were so far below market. I mean, mobile home park, different section, people own their homes, they're vested. We want to create value for them.
I mean, do people listening know what your thing was?
No, but this was, tenants that had leases that expired, that were under market.
Yeah.
And we took a small sampling and we said, hey, these people are going to go, we have to get these rents to market. There's leases that expired. We moved it there. So the strategy was right, right? Was in line. What ended up happening is now one person complained, becomes a small, becomes a story, but let the press do their job.
Yeah.
Like when they researched it, they realized like, hey, there really wasn't much of a story there, even though they're committed to running a narrative.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to rush to respond to defend myself. Like let them do their job first. So I would just preface anybody, reporter reaches out to you. You don't have to answer them the moment they ask the question.
Yeah.
Right. Like let them do their job a little bit. Now, did you, I mean, I know you're very, and I'm going to use this word in that way, like aggressive, like you're willing to go out there and I like that about you, where you'll go sit there and you'll have those conversations. But did you make them like send it in an email? Did you just get on the phone with them? Like, how was your approach?
Yeah. So, and it's funny, and I don't know, it happens to me quite often that when something's going on, I usually hear it from others before it comes to me.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's the same thing with everybody, but I'm like, I hear all this stuff going on, but no one's calling me. Everyone's calling people I know to get to me, get information. And I'm like, just tell them to call me. Like, give them my phone number, reach out to me. So there's something that I learned with what you were just talking about. You don't have to respond, right away. So over the past, I guess 2 months or so, I probably made like the top of the local paper. Here's the SI Live, Staten Island Advance. That's the paper that we all grew up on, but now it's mostly electronic. Do they still print?
Maybe like 3 copies a day.
Okay. So I think over the past few months, I was like top headline 3 or 4 times. So the first time they didn't reach out to me at all. They were going through my architect to get information. And then he was which they presented him very nicely. And then after that, they were coming to me, and I didn't get back to them on all of the articles because I didn't realize how rapidly it happens. If you don't get back to them, if you don't have to answer right away, because if you say something, they're going to put it on the books. If you write something, they will quote it, which is very good. And if you say nothing at all and you miss the deadline, they're printing an article on anything they think.
Correct.
So they don't have to ask a question and answer it immediately. You should get back to them within a very short period of time, because you don't want it to go completely without your word.
Correct.
You don't want to say something too rapidly that doesn't make sense and doesn't work with your narrative. But you do want to get to them quick enough where they're able to put something you said in.
Well, and look, this isn't. Sometimes it's okay not to have a comment, but I've found that if there is a request, and I've had this happen a number of times. Like I've had some really good press, and then you're in business a long time. You're every once in a while you're going to get hit with something.
Yeah.
So one thing that I realized is, what's the publication, or who's the author, right? What's their narrative? Like what's their storylines, right? So a business paper, right, whose audience is a business owners or entrepreneurs, might be completely different than a newspaper article reporter who has a different slant or lean. So know who they are. I always found, like, I'll answer the question. Send me the questions in writing first. What's the topic? What's the question?
Yeah.
Right. Now I have a chance to take a look at what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
Right. Because I remember the first time that I had a bad story coming out on me. Right. And this is many, many, many years ago. Right. And I knew the publication that it was coming out. I knew who the author was. Right. And at the time I was very active in non-performing loans.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Non-performing loans. Those were people, this was back at,
Yeah. I mean,
coming out
that's
of
a hot topic.
coming out of the Great Recession.
Yeah.
So here's what they had.
That topic you quickly get into, like you're taking advantage of people.
It was Frank Rizzo.
Yeah.
Staten Island. Collecting a debt.
Yeah.
Soprano-esque tactics, right? Yeah. Like the story wrote itself. I had nothing.
Yeah.
There was nothing I was going to say that was going to change that narrative, right? So sometimes, and I remember somebody very wise came to me because, the first time this hits you, you're like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Somebody very wise to me came to me and said, listen, Frank, in 6 months from now, they're not going to remember why you were in the papers. They're just going to remember you were in the papers.
Yes.
Right. And I kind of took back, was able to grab a hold of myself and said, all right, I don't have to necessarily respond because I know the narratives aren't going to, the truth isn't going to fit the narrative.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they're not going to report that we were correct. And what the outcome was that, we ended up, what we were trying to do and how we resolved the situation. It was more of, hey, this is the story they want to run.
Yeah.
Can you respond to that? Well, what's the response to that? The response is nothing, right?
So here's my take on the whole thing. And I love that story because
I actually didn't at the time.
Yeah. And I love it. And here's why. And I think if anyone's going to get anything out of this podcast, it will simply be, how do I take advantage of this PR? The first question I have to ask is, am I breaking the law?
Correct.
No. You borrowing paper, you're not breaking the law, probably. So you have to understand, there's going to be two people listening to your and mine story. Your story is maybe he's taking, people aren't paying their loans and people are in trouble and he's taking advantage of them or whatever. And I don't know if that's but whatever it was. And for me, oh my God, he's coming in and he's ruining neighborhoods. So there's two people that are going to be two major groups that are listening to these stories. For me, it's going to be, one group of people is he's coming in and he's ruining our neighborhood. How dare him? He lives in Jersey and he's crushing our neighborhoods. And now my kids aren't going to be safe. One group of people. The other group of people who aren't making any noise, but are listening very loudly is, this guy is taking serious action. He is not messing around. And I want to be a part of that business.
Well, and what you also had, right, which was key. And I told you this offline, that it was because your narrative went beyond the story. And then it became, you're at a community board meeting. You're going to be a topic of discussion. So at that point, you have to put a face to it, because it's easy to have an ogre that they don't see. It's more challenging to do that if someone's going to go there and I'm going to let you say what you want to say, but say it to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So say it to me at that point. And that, I think, is where at some point you do, there's times to respond. Right. Yeah. And that's a time where a response is warranted and necessary. So how was that? Like, do you think you shifted narrative by going there?
I can't say it loud enough or say it enough of how awesome it is to face people who are against what you're doing. It is so powerful, because even in that group, one closing statement before they shut the meeting down, one guy yelled from across the room, he says, "How do we make you quit?" And I'm like, that, sir, will be impossible. And then the meeting was over, ended so well. He came up to me after. He was the first one. He was actually the picture that made the paper. It looked like I was like, they caught me like mid face, and it looked like I was aggressive and there was a cop in the background. Like, just the picture looked well, but, for the press. But really what was happening is that guy ran up to me right after the meeting, beelined right to me, stuck his hand out, and he says, "You got balls, man. I can't believe you're here. This is awesome. Congratulations with your success." And I think that when you're able to go into an environment that you didn't have to be in, and everyone in that room was against me and was there to yell. And at the end, I says, "Listen, I appreciate your guys' time, and hopefully you appreciate mine." There was an overwhelming, "Yes, we appreciate your time." So you are able to get people who hate you and get them to appreciate you being there.
Yeah. But I think what you probably downplay a little bit, right, on it, but you do have the ability to segue and reframe the question.
Yeah.
Right. So, and whether you do it naturally or not, but part of what has to occur if you're going to be in that position, and I don't know if you watch the Sunday talk shows with politicians on,
Not really.
but they're, if you ever see them get a question, they always
Yeah.
know how to pivot that question into what they, where they really want to take where they really want to take the audience, or where they
Yep.
want to. So part of that is, and it's a skill and it could be practiced and it learned when you're in that situation. It's okay, let's address that issue, but let's talk about why this really is occurring, right?
Mhm.
And what we're trying to address. And that kind of reframes the question a little bit.
Mhm.
So like if you're caught into that scenario where I have to make a statement or I have to get in there, reframing that, like going back and forth, right? You're never going to win that, right?
No.
You're never going to win.
Nope.
Hey, I don't want to change the neighborhood. Oh, but I'm changing the neighborhood. Like
Mhm.
that's something that's just never going to win.
No,
right?
right. I agree.
Right. Like that's an argument that's circular, and but if you're reframing the question of, hey, we have an affordability issue here.
Yeah.
Right. And I know deep down we all want to keep our sons and daughters in Staten Island. The only way that happens is if we get more housing. And the only way that that's going to occur is on this. So whatever the question may be, whether you're raising rents in an
Mhm.
apartment or a mobile home park, hey, I'm making improvements to infrastructure, right? I'm improving roads. I'm redoing these water and sewer lines are 50 years old, and
Mhm.
I've got to sit there and update that system. That capital has to come back from somewhere. I
Yeah.
can't do that and keep rents at that number. And the only way to do that is say, hey, I'm going to make these improvements, but costs have got to go up, but the value of being there is going to be increased. And I think that changes the narrative a bit and it reframes the conversation from, hey, you raised the price,
Yeah.
to, hey, you've created more value. And what we find, like
Mhm.
from the mobile home park perspective, one of the reasons we love this business is when someone owns their home, no one wants to pay more, right?
Right.
No one wants to pay more,
No.
right? No one.
Yes.
But if I can share with them, hey, you're the same home you have in this community right now. If you wanted to sell it, maybe you get 15,000.
Mhm.
But if I improve the community and more people want to come here,
That's right.
you're going to have some more additional equity in your home. You're going to be able to sell it for more, create more options.
Absolutely.
So you're going to pay a little bit more incrementally each month, but we're going to add so much additional value to you being here, your stay, your exist.
It's so it's impossible to get that message across.
I don't think it's impossible, but you have to be you have to be practiced at it.
I think that what you're saying is absolutely correct. And I think the only way to get people to understand is to complete the business plan. You cannot get people to understand prior to you starting the actual project. It has to make the turn. The apartment community has to be nicer. There has to be less crime in the area.
Mhm.
You have to have pushed out all the vacant cars that were originally sitting in the lot. All the weeds that were growing up front have to be gone. It has to make the turn, and then people will then be able to say, oh yeah, those guys, they're great. They turned around the whole community.
Mm.
But the number one thing that I've noticed that makes headlines and the news loves and the people love and the politician love is the word greed for the person that's actually doing it. So you're going to be considered greedy for raising the rents. But in this capitalist environment, if you do all that work and you didn't provide the value that you say you're going to provide, you will have a vacant apartment community.
Correct.
So if you do everything you say is the only way that you'll be successful. So we could go in and jack all the rents in an apartment building. And the great thing about this country is that all those people could just leave and you go somewhere else and then you're out of business.
So I see that you do because you got a big social media presence. When people come back at you, right? Because I'm sure you probably get a million comments. I mean, you get a lot of comments that are probably good, right?
Yeah.
But when you go out there, you probably get bad comments. Like, how do you handle that?
Here, so the word greed comes to me a lot, and especially with this new thing that we're doing, it comes to me a lot. And the one way to offset greed, and the questions that I was asked this a couple times at the community board meeting, is some people went aggressive as saying, you're knocking one house down. Why don't you put one back? I'm like, okay. So what I paid for the property is public information, all into the property for $950,000. So the one woman who suggested that I knock one down and put it back, basically, And I was trying to isolate people in their questions. Like if I heard a question, I would answer it and then I'd get right to you. And I'd say, your question was, I'd repeat it, and then I'd address it. Would you invest $950,000 into a property, completely renovate it, which would cost me about $500,000, and then sell it for 1.5? Would you do that? And she's like, well, no, but you could because you have a lot of money. I'm like, that's not fair to say, because the only reason people have money is because they've made moves that make them money. So if you wouldn't do it, I wouldn't do it. So really the best way to attack the whole greed thing, which is kind of crazy when people say you're greedy, because I hope whoever's calling you greedy, I hope you wake up every day and you go to work to make money for your family. Sure, it's also important to enjoy what you do. But the most part, if we're doing what we love, but we're generating absolutely no income, unless you're into the point of your life where you've made millions and millions, or you're a billionaire, they could then get back into their point of life where actually they go to work to lose money, or they go to work, they're just running a charity and basically money's going out the door every day. That's a whole other stage of life. But for the most part, every single one of you wake up, hopefully you do what you love to do, but you are there to make money, hopefully. And if you were presented with an opportunity within your field to make more and continue to do what you do, and it's all 100% legal, hopefully you take advantage of that opportunity. So that's all we're doing. And we feel like we are doing a responsible job by not completely bringing the property to its highest and best use. We are creating almost a similar profit. So really what we're able to do is create a similar profit by doing something different that we believe fits the community. Because, the truth is, if there was a tremendous profit difference by bringing it to its highest and best use, we would go in that angle and we would take advantage of that. But what makes us smart is we're able to produce something that we believe fits the neighborhood and make almost the same amount of money. So that's a win-win for everybody. But the word greed gets thrown around quite often. Don't ever let the word greed make you turn the camera at yourself and say, am I being greedy? You're not.
And I think what's important to know when you're going through that situation, or if you find yourself, going through that situation, and quite frankly, like I said, if you're buying properties in different areas, if you're trying to create value, you're looking to create value, you're shaking that tree, you're changing things around, inevitably this may come up. You can't allow the comments that come to you to change your narrative, right? To the point where I'm going to answer your question of why how can I prove to you that I'm not being greedy?
Yeah.
Right. Look, in one case, it's, prepared, I'm prepared statement. Hey, we're undertaking, overdue improvements, right, that are necessary to the community. We're reviewing things on a case-by-case basis. It's being specific to the point of what the narrative is, what the truth is, and sticking to that and not looking to answer every question, because to your point, the people that are there that are viewing this, it's easy to throw out those terms, right? It's greed, or you don't care, or all these other things. And how do I prove to you that if you're already coming from that perspective, how do I prove to you something that's not necessary? How do I prove a negative, right? So I can't fight that. If you're in that situation, you can't fight that. You have your narrative. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And it sounds to me like you were pretty consistent on that. Like it didn't waver inside of those questioning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's like, and I've heard this over and over and over again. Make sure you answer questions. Try to answer questions with questions. So if someone has a question that you say in your head, because let's call it what it is. It's very easy to do the numbers on my projects and say, he's making $1 million. Like, a lot of people who are doing the numbers on it, they earn significantly less than that. And they could never imagine putting themselves in a position where they could make $1 million. So it's very difficult to peel people away from the idea that they know how much you're making And let's see, what am I trying to say?
Well, I think it's not the $1 million that you're making because you are putting capital risk. It's
no, you understand that, but it's tough to talk yourself off of a perch when someone can easily say he's making $1 million to do this project. So you just have to reel it back in and ask questions. And you have to reel it back in and say, if you were in the position I was in, what would you do? And it'd be very difficult for someone to say, I would take the route that would make you half that.
I try to frame it in terms of the benefit.
Yeah.
Right. So here's the benefit for you. Right. Meaning, hey, if we're going into a mobile home park and people own their homes and listen, they come in there and they've been there with, Mr. Jones, he's owned the park for 30 years. He's the third generation that's been there. Lot rents are significantly below market, and we never try to shock anybody, right? But improvements being made, rents got to move. That's just a fact of life. Costs go up. Professional management costs money.
Yeah.
Right. Here's the alternative, right? And I don't want this alternative. The city doesn't want mobile home parks, or the county doesn't. They would do anything. And if we're not able, right, to make this mobile home park work, improve it, make it safe, make it clean, make it secure, and provide that affordable housing opportunity for other people, then somebody's going to come in and bring in multifamily housing or do single family housing, and you're going to have to move anyway. So the benefits of me doing this is I get to keep this as a mobile home park. You get to stay here. Yes, rents may shift a little bit, but overall you're going to get more value because you don't have to move anyway.
Yeah. So I guess my last statement didn't come out as I wanted to in my head. Like, it makes sense in my head. I'm trying to get it out. But in your sense, all people see is you're making more money. But really, like, my opinion is you would ask the question to someone and say, if you had the opportunity to buy this broken down mobile home park with these apartments that are well overdue on repairs, you bought it and you had the opportunity to turn it around, and the way that you had to do it is unfortunately raise rents, would you take that opportunity? Or would you buy it and just leave it in its state and just let it rot and leave the conditions as they are? And without question, people, I think, would say, I would make the improvements. Well, how? Well, I would do the repairs. Well, where would you get the money from? Your own pocket? Or would you say, like, hey, we're providing a better product, we have to charge more for it? Would you do that?
And for you,
I think the questions of back to people, because I think you sitting still and trying to convince them that you raising rents, because all they see is raise rents, you're making more money. It's not really.
And they see that you're building, but if you want to keep your kids and your grandkids here, you can't do it unless there's product that's affordable.
That's right.
Right. And so here I have to provide this product. And to do that means that, not every home can be 1.5, 1.6, 1.7,
that's right,
because they can't afford it. So there's got to be a give or take, right? And that sometimes, again, shakes the tree. But here's the benefit. Your family members are going to be able to stay here. You might be able to live on your block. They might have the same home that you had, right? But they'll be in the same neighborhood. Isn't that something that you want to see? And I think that kind of reframes the question. So I think it's important for anybody listening is to know what your frame is, right? So again, obviously it starts with having the right plan and strategy, not just that it's, hey, I can do it, but it's, hey, is it right? And what is it going to look like? Kind of look at that vantage point. Like, what is it going to look like from the outside? Number two, don't rush to respond. Like, I don't have to answer every question, right? The report is not your wife, right? My wife asked me a question, I got to respond, right, quickly. But if it's, know who they are, what their background is, what the topic, what the questions are. If you can, put it in writing, right? Because everything it's documented. Your words can be twisted.
Sure.
Right. But a written email response is just as good. But I think for your point where the narrative gets, it got political, right? Or it gets, you have to put a face to it, but you did it, you're reframing the question to the people.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, if you're involved in a situation where catches wind of the press, take a deep breath and figure out how to leverage that position.
Correct.
To its maximum ability. And once in a blue moon, the answer will be say nothing. But the only reason I would say nothing is you're in a position that you're just constantly getting hit with press so much that now you're like, you know what? Fox 5 or Fox or ABC, you call me, I'll answer you. The little BS paper in the corner, call me, like you're wasting my time. But if you are able to put yourself in the position to catch some press, take advantage of that as much as you possibly can, because the ears that are listening, some of those ears are going to be your potential future investors.
So would you do that in all cases?
Yeah, I'm gonna
because I bring this up because
think about like your situation, the previous one with the buying paper. And again, I don't know the story entirely, but some people aren't happy. And then what about the guys who put no comments anywhere? They don't really go on Facebook. And they're like, oh, Frank Rizzo's buying paper. Maybe we should call this guy and see if we have these loans.
See, I look at it. So your situation, if it's local, and I know the battlefield, right? Or you don't have to be local, but you know the battlefield, you know the players, you know the people.
Yeah,
it's a little easier because you already have a backup, right? I've got people that could come in this neighborhood or town who know me, who could speak to me, and I could maybe some levers that I could pull.
Yeah.
But if I'm going into an area where, you know, I'm making friends, I don't have that long history, you know, I'm very happy. Just I want to execute the business plan. Yeah. Right. I want to get that done. And if I could neuter that story, if there is a story, and if I know that, then okay, let's move that forward, because then I want to keep it focused on the positive. Yeah. Right. And I think, you know, you've got Staten Island roots, right? Yeah. And so you come into that story and you've got a fan base, you know, I don't fan base, but people who support you, like who've done well with you, know you, bought your product, and they're like, hey, Chris is really going to do this. Like you have, but would you, if you were doing that and I'm just in the middle of Tennessee and you knew nobody, would that be the same approach that you would take?
Even harder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even harder. You want to know why? Because who in the middle of Tennessee knows that you're buying mobile home parks? Nobody. Who knows now? More people. So while a whole bunch of people are going to be upset that you're raising rents, and at the end, there's eyes now on this community. So whereas no one would give a shit anywhere that you're improving this community, now people are watching it. And when you're done, they're going to say, Frank Rizzo and his team did a spectacular job on this thing. Wow. And now more people know that you're buying mobile home parks and apartment communities, that the person, I'm sure, you know, you started in Staten Island as a real estate agent or broker. How many times it's definitely happened to you where people like, you know what, I'm ashamed of my house. I'd prefer if we didn't do any showings. There are people who feel that way about their properties and their mobile home parks, and they just let them fall apart so deeply that they're like, how could I just make this thing go away without, who could I sell this thing to? Frank Rizzo and his team are buying mobile home parks that are in really bad shape, and he will just buy it. Let's just call him and he'll be the buyer for it. So I'm going hard here. I would go even harder in another town.
That's an interesting take. I would say that's an interesting take.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that if you're in real estate right now, right, you have to be conscious of your narrative that you're putting out there. I don't care what product that you're acquiring, that part of what you do is controlling that narrative, because lenders are looking at it more than ever. Yeah. Right. They want to know what kind of operator you are. So you have to make sure you can underwrite the deal.
Do you know how many lenders have called me?
I can imagine.
Hey, it seems like you got a lot of work.
So that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's it. But I think you can underwrite the deal. You're looking at structures. You're looking at how to finance deals. I think there has to be some thought and time given to your place in the market, what your PR is, what your narrative is, and make sure you stick to it, and make sure that your business plan aligns with your narrative, right? Like you can't say, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is my narrative, and then do something completely opposite, because then it's not true. But you have to make sure that aligns. And I think that's a becoming more important part of what you do as a real estate investor. Like you have to pay attention to it.
Yeah. I mean, doing this is a whole other, we could have a whole podcast on this, but people are going to say, a big question that's came across me is, what do you think is the biggest thing that's attributed you to your success? Is I say I'm going to do something and I carry it through to the end.
Yes.
100% of the time you start something and you finish it, because you know what, your project specifically, or my projects, if you caught a little bit of heat and you says, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Now you're a pushover and no one's going to want to do business with you. The people that matter aren't going to want to do business with you. Those brokers or those agents, the brokers or the property owners that were going to call you to get something done, they're like, oh, he's not the guy. He doesn't get it done. So you push through all that and you get it done. It's just going to level you up. So,
and I think you have to be prepared for it, right? Listen, it's not good when you get, when you get called on the mat, but don't rush into doing something. I think the most important thing
it's 100% awesome to get called to the mat. Because think about, like, use the mat literally, right? Like my son's in wrestling now, the wrestling mat. Think about if you're on the side and you make it the entire event and you were on the side, but in the middle, they're like, you're up, get in. And you kick that guy's ass. Now you went from nobody on the sidelines to now, did you see this guy kick that guy's ass?
So if you're listening and you're in the middle of a PR nightmare.
Yeah. You're on the mat, baby.
Call Chris Stout, because he's going to sit there and take it. Yeah. He's going to be your spokesman.
You weren't on the mat before. No one knew who you were. Now you're on the mat. Now we're watching.
I love it.
People go to, why do you think boxing events are sold out? UFC's sold out. People want to see people on the mat.
Got it. Okay. So if people are having that issue, right, having a PR issue, or they're going through a challenge in their project, or they want to reach out to you to find out what you're doing, Chris, how would they get in touch with you?
We're on a million socials, but the easiest way, Official Stout on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
You see him on Instagram. What do you have? What, 1 million followers now?
It's like 85,000, something like that.
So
official 100.
Official Stout on Instagram. Chris, thank you for being our first. This is important. Our first return guest on the MHP Exchange
I'll come
podcast.
Back as much as you'd like.
All right. And this has been good luck on your projects going forward. And I appreciate you being part of this conversation. So until next time, everyone, happy investing.